Welcome back to another episode of City Speak. As a bonus episode this month, we are sharing an episode of the Chief Influencer podcast, which features an interview with NLC CEO and Executive Director Clarence Anthony. The Chief Influencer podcast highlights leaders who have figured out how to break through in today's fragmented and noisy world. Clarence discusses the importance of inclusive leadership, the lessons from his early mayoral career, and his strategies in navigating complex political landscapes. We hope you enjoy today's conversation between Clarence Anthony and Chief Influencer host Anthony Shop.
As a former municipal official, you have to remember all politics is local. And if you're mayor of South Bay, Florida, you have to first focus on your community. And I think that most residents, no matter what happens in Washington, D.C., they tend to be concerned generally about their community first. And it's like looking at a map of your town. The first place you look is your own street, your own home. And that's the way our residents are, because all surveys show that the most trusted level of government still is the local government, the city and town and village level trust, because, they see you every day.
Welcome to another episode of Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop, co-founder of Social Driver. Washington is the center of influence in the U.S. and arguably the world. Chief Influencer spotlights leaders who have figured out how to break through in today's fragmented and noisy environment. Social Driver teamed up with the George Washington University College of Professional Studies and Communications Board to recognize these leaders as chief influencers and highlight how they inspire and influence others. I am thrilled to introduce today's guest, Clarence E. Anthony, the CEO and Executive Director of the National League of Cities, the largest organization representing America's cities and their leaders. Now, before we dive in, here are a few things that I think you should know about today's guest. Number one, Clarence began his career in public service by serving as mayor of South Bay, Florida, for 24 years. As mayor, he created new educational and economic opportunities for residents, including building his community's first library. During that time, he served as president of the Florida League of Cities and president of the National League of Cities, which paved the way for his current role as CEO. Number two, following his time in office, Clarence represented local governments on the world stage as founding treasurer and interim manager of United Cities and Local Governments. He later founded Anthony Government Solutions, a firm focused on strategic visioning, policy development, and management restructuring for government and private sector organizations. And number three, Clarence became the CEO of the National League of Cities in 2013. Under his leadership, NLC has advanced policies that expand local democracy and provide direct funding for local programs related to housing, public safety, infrastructure, and sustainability. Today, the National League of Cities continues to advance policies that strengthen local leadership and provide support for local leaders to promote equitable public health and safety, economic development, and sustainability for all residents. Clarence, you have been called many things in your career: Mr. Mayor, Fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration, proud dad of a former NFL star, Riddell Anthony, president of the National League of Cities, and of course now chief executive. Well, we are thrilled to call you a chief influencer now as well. Welcome to the show.
Wow, Anthony, thank you so much. Actually, I'm going to have to take that introduction everywhere I go and just have them to play that for me. But it is an honor to be here today to talk to you and share with your listeners, my perspective of life and my vision for city leaders all over America.
Well, we are just so thrilled that you are with us today. And I really enjoyed learning about your career. I'm so excited to dive into it. because not a lot of people may know. I mean, people in your circles certainly do, but you were elected mayor of South Bay, Florida, only 24 years of age. And then you served in that role for another 24 years. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that role prepared you to lead the National League of Cities as CEO, and also what you know now that you wish you knew back at age 24 when you were elected.
Wow. Going back to that time, had just graduated from Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton, Florida. Went back home and went to a city commission meeting. I was 23 years old at that time. I had got a graduate degree, really thought I know everything about public policy. My mom complained about there was no real police patrol in our community. So I went to the city commission meeting and I did what they told me to do. My name is Clarence Anthony. I'm back home from college. And my mother, she has a problem with crime and public safety on her street and neighborhood. And the mayor said, Mr. Anthony, welcome back home, but we got a lot of things that we're focused on right now. And we're really busy, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And I stood there and I said, oh my gosh, I know this guy just didn't say my mother's issues are not important. And I sat down by one of my colleagues, a young guy, and he said, you should run for mayor. You know, you've been in politics at FAU in high school. And I thought about it, and I really didn't believe he meant it, but he said it again. And I ran for office. I was in a runoff with the incumbent. And man, I won by a landslide of 33 votes.
Oh my goodness.
Man, that was a mandate. And really, you know, in government and policy, it becomes a mandate if you win by one vote. So right. I think back on that time, and what I recognized was that I knew public policy, but I didn't know how to govern. I oftentimes say to my members, the easy part is getting elected. The difficult part is governing. And so I got involved in the Florida League of Cities and learned a lot about public policy, and then rose to get involved at the National League of Cities. And both of those experiences were amazing because I got a chance to recognize that I had people that were going through the same issues that I was going through as a mayor. I knew I needed to learn, and they provided training and education. And when I got to the national level, I was a small city of about 9,000 people in my community. I couldn't afford a lobbying firm. So the National League of Cities became my resource of representing me as mayor of South Bay and my residents. And as I think about me being in this job, when the headhunter called and said, your name has come up like 3 or 4 times, I said, no way. I mean, they wouldn't hire a former mayor or a former president of the National League of Cities. Went through that process and was shocked. Even today, I'm surprised I got selected. But I think one of the reasons why, and what I learned from that experience that helps me here in this job today, is I truly do love public policy. And I love my job and the people I work with. Most importantly, the work we do really does have major impact on the lives of people and communities. It gives me a chance to really give back every day because I grew up in a real poor community. The per capita income when I was growing up was $13,000 annually for families. Worked in the celery fields, worked at Winn-Dixie as a bag boy, and had all through college. And so I feel like it prepared me because I can almost visualize that there are so many more Clarences in communities all over America. And I get the blessing and opportunity every day to help leaders to think about ways that they can improve their community, strategies that they can use, not just in one sector of a community, but to be able to develop public policy that everybody in that city feels it touches their lives. So sometimes I think the passion that I show, even my staff probably don't understand my why I feel so passionate, but it is about the lived experience that I had and the impact on public policy, the housing, the community development projects that was developed so that I'll have a house as a young kid, the basic equal opportunity grant dollars. I wouldn't have been able to go to college if it wasn't for those things. The Civil Rights Act, I probably wouldn't have ever been able to become a mayor or in my community. And so I can go on and on about why this role has been able to help me fulfill a lot of the dreams I had as a kid. Now, I look back at that 23-year-old that decided to run and then the 24 that got elected. And I honestly say to myself, were you crazy? What were you thinking at that time? And I would tell myself again, step up, don't complain, be a part of the solutions to the issues that are facing your community. Find ways to give back and be resilient as much as you can as you go through life. Because I do think there are decisions that leaders have to make. One would be for me to have waited till I get my career stable and I have real direction in life. The other is that you serve early and bring new ideas and fresh approaches, naive approaches to public policy. And I think that's what I did. Even though I was educated and had a master's degree, almost a PhD in public policy, I hadn't had the experience of really governing. And that's what the National League of Cities do for all of our members. We get them prepared to lead and govern.
I'd love to pick up on that because you said that at the beginning too. You understood public policy, from your academic work, but you didn't understand how to govern. And I know, in my own experience, I had the opportunity to work for the mayor of Kansas City right when she finished her term and she ran for Congress. And one of the things I heard from so many people who had that municipal experience was that, you can have the best idea in the world, but if you don't get a bunch of different stakeholders on board with the idea where they feel like it's theirs and, they have ownership of it, your idea is not going to go anywhere. And that's a lesson that I think is learned with maturity. And, I was fortunate to work for Kay Barnes, who was an expert at that. Is that part of what you're talking about when you say you didn't know how to govern? And is that a lesson that you learned and that you've seen in your role about not just having a good idea, but figuring out a way to get a lot of other people on board, even though they may not agree with each other on a number of things? I'd love to hear that side of influence from you.
Yeah, I think that the way you described it is accurate, and it's something I think about even when I was in the private sector, public and private sector. From a public sector perspective, as a mayor or a city commissioner or council member, you can have the best idea, but you need the majority of the commission to support your idea. And I do think you and I have learned that every issue is separate from the other issue. So if I propose an issue and I fail to get the support of my city council at that time, I go on to the next issue. And that's a part of leadership and governing. From a public-private perspective, a city could have the most amazing vision of a piece of property or downtown, but they have no development or private sector interest. So good public policy makes you recognize that you need to reach out to all sectors, all stakeholders. You need to reach out and get the public-private sector involved, the chamber involved, get the school system involved, but more, and also get your commissioners and your mayors on committed to this work as well. And I've said that good public policy really does include the public, private, the nonprofit, as well as the local government, because everybody is a stakeholder. And the one thing that often happens is that we don't take the time to be inclusive at the beginning. We wait, and you've probably seen this, Anthony, where all of a sudden an item is before the city commission, and it's usually a rate increase or some kind of increase, and the public stands up and this is the final reading for this issue. And about maybe 100 people show up, and you're in trouble when 100 people show up at your city council meeting, and they all stand up and said, "This is the first time I've heard about this rate increase." Now, you've advertised it in the newspaper. You've advertised it in all of the radio programs, but you didn't think about going to the church, the chamber, the neighborhood association, the nonprofit associations that are in your community, using different languages, because your community is, and my community is, very diverse in terms of language and culture. And so I just found that the best approach to get stakeholders to work with you is to be able to do it up front, and it saves a lot of time. And I think we do that here at the National League of Cities, and that's a very important lesson for municipal officials. And it's also a private sector approach too, that I think leaders who are in leadership need to recognize that you can't do it alone. And I know I'm going long, but I want to tell you the story. It was, I was at my city commission meeting, and every Tuesday before my city commission meeting, I would always have dinner with my mother. And truth be told, and she's gone on, she was the real mayor, because I traveled a lot. And they would go to her house. They would call her about their water bill. They called her about the lawn not being mowed in the neighborhood. But that night, I get to the end of the agenda, and before I get there, I see this person coming in to the chambers, and I said, "That's my mom. I just saw her at dinner. She didn't say anything." So, time for public comments. Any member of the public would like to address the commission. You got 3 minutes. And it was like slow motion, Anthony. She got up, took her time, got to the podium. "My name is Irene Anthony, and I live at 300 Southeast 4th Avenue. And I'm here to complain about the garbage pickup." Now, in my head, it is February. My election is next month. And I could just imagine the mayor's mama complaining about garbage pickup.
Oh my gosh.
And I looked at her. She said, "Mr. Mayor, my baby, and the commission." And I said, "Ma, I just saw you like an hour ago." She said, "Yeah, but if I would have told you, you would have thought it was your responsibility only. Garbage pickup is the whole city's and the city commission. And I want everybody to work together to solve this issue." And that was something that I remembered so often, that my mother recognized that if she would have told me at dinner, I would have taken care of that.
Right.
Because I think it's my job as mayor to do it. But she wanted the entire city commission and the residents in the community to deal with the issue. And I think that as leaders, we need to recognize that there's a lot on our shoulders that we carry, and we think we have to be alone in carrying that load. But a real good leader is one that really looks to their team to be a partner in resolving challenges and working on issues. And that's what I try to do every day here at the National League of Cities. Look to my team members to step up and be a part of the decision-making and the direction of the organization.
Yeah. I love that story. What a great story and lesson from your mom, because, a leader that does take everything on their shoulders, we're all human and there's only so much you can do. And that lesson that it really is a problem that the whole community needs to be aware of and help out. I mean, I think that's a great lesson. And it occurs to me that you probably felt that lesson during the COVID-19 pandemic, when the National League of Cities played a critical role in getting federal aid out to communities. And I wonder if you could talk about that, because, being a former mayor yourself, you knew what was happening on the ground across our country and how communities were at so much risk during that time. And you had to play a really important role influencing cities, and being their leader, but at the same time being their spokesperson in Washington to get the message out to the administration and to Capitol Hill. So you must, have just really flexed your muscles of influence and learned so much during that experience. And I wonder if you could share a little bit about it.
Yeah. First of all, I can't believe it's been 5 years since that happened. And before I get to flexing the few muscles I have, I'll talk about how I felt for a minute as a leader and being responsible. March the 13th, we had just ended a major conference here in Washington, D.C., where we had about 3,000 municipal officials together. And we had heard about the pandemic and said, I'm not sure we should go forward with this conference. And I had to make that decision, which was a very hard decision. Yeah. In a lot of ways, I look back to be very transparent, and it was a selfish decision that I made. Now I think about it. It was one that I really felt we had worked hard on this conference. We had the speakers all lined up. Yeah. Everybody was prepared. People were on their way. And I felt like we should have done it. So we had all of the sanitation stations, wash your hands signs. We had masks available. And I would tell my members to just, high five or bump hands. And throughout the whole conference, I watched elected officials walk up to each other. Hey, how you doing? And they would give each other a hug. So they didn't hear anything I said. But then it ended, and things had really gone the wrong direction in terms of the numbers that we were seeing. And I said to my staff, you guys go home. This was a Friday, and I'll alert you guys of when we're going to come back. And that was like 2 years later. But I will tell you that I look back, I was very concerned about my team because many of them have families and they had been together all that time. And everybody was fine. But it was a very, very difficult decision to make. But then the thoughts of, I now have to lead because our leaders needed the National League of Cities even more than they have ever needed us before. So we put together what we call a Cities Are Essential campaign. And that campaign included every stakeholder that we could get involved, whether it's federal agencies, whether it's National Association Home Builders, the transit associations, the counties. We worked with everybody and our members, because what I was seeing every day was two things, something I never imagined: downtowns all over America empty, no cars on the roads. I saw, blue sky lines that, top of buildings that I never saw before. But I also saw two other things. I saw local leaders out in the community trying to help the elderly. I saw first responders out in the community working and trying to make sure that those services continued, EMS, police, but also one thing, cities never closed. We still got the wastewater systems working in the community. We still provided the social services. And so with that, we figured out that cities are going to need resources. So we started working with the Trump administration at that time to get the CARES Act passed. And the CARES Act was a great start to helping cities recover. But it was the larger cities in America that got the direct funding, and the other cities had to go through the state. Then the Biden administration was elected, and we went to work with them as well. And we were able to get monies approved that every city in America was getting direct funding for their support and services, and helping them to return to what, I don't think we'll ever use this word, what is normal anymore. But we did work really hard with them. And that was a moment that I look back on and I think about in a way to say that, wow, we made it through. The National League of Cities really stood up and provided the support and services for local governments throughout America in a time of need. Our mission, we looked at our mission almost a daily basis, reminding us of solutions, federal advocacy, technical assistance, best practices, next practices. So those things were always in our mind. And I think if it was not for that advocacy, surely things would have come back, but it wouldn't have come back so quickly. And we would not have been able to rebound as communities if it wasn't for those dollars that we received over the last 5 years. So I really am proud of what we have achieved in that area.
This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. I'm a proud GW graduate myself, and I can attest that the faculty members combine academic rigor with real-world lessons that can't always be found in textbooks. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information. So let me ask you a question about this. And you talked about the different stakeholders that you had to influence in that, and you talked about the breadth of your members. But when you think about the different members that the National League of Cities has, you're all over the country geographically, right? North, south, east, west, in the middle. You have really small communities like the one that you come from in Florida, but large communities as well with millions of people. And then along with that, you have different political ideologies and backgrounds and regional differences. So how do you as a leader develop this mission that you can get everybody aligned around, but at the same time, tailor the message and the approach to the different types of leaders and the different types of communities that you have under this umbrella. I think that must be, a masterstroke in influence to figure out how to kind of keep everybody moving in the same direction with the same vision and mission, while at the same time, you do have to tailor that, I would imagine, to the different leaders in the communities that you work with.
Well, thank you for that question, because now you've made me more stressed today in my job. The real answer is that we stay focused on our mission. And you can be a large city, small or a medium-sized city. If you have housing issues, affordability, access, a gap in housing, you may be in the west, the south, east, or north. But if you have that issue, your city, the magnitude, because your city is a large city, is different. But the issue of housing is the same. And so we work every day to stay in our lane, to focus on housing, transportation, public safety, infrastructure, sustainability. Even we focus on areas of education, early childhood education issues, because city leaders, when they come to our conference, when they serve on our policy committees, and they are part of our leadership, they all come here with one goal, and that is to advocate for resources on behalf of cities, towns, and villages in America. Now, there are times that it is difficult to say that this issue is not a municipal issue, or that issue is not a municipal issue. And there are times that I would say that we move outside of some of those lines, if you will. But majority of the time, and most of the time, we focus on those city issues that our members say that they're facing. And we, oftentimes people ask, are you partisan? I'm partisan, but I'm partisan toward cities. I lobby for cities. I don't lobby for private sector. I don't lobby for media. I don't advocate for any other sector. My bread and butter and what I care for and what I fight for every day here in Washington, D.C. and provide a voice to is for cities, towns, and villages, no matter the size, whether they're suburban, they're rural, they're small. The magnitude is different, but the issues are the same. And that's how we've been able to, over 100 years, been that voice for cities. And I'm really proud of that.
Yeah. When you travel to a city, do you sometimes have to be incognito because, might feel like you have to reach out to every mayor every time you go anywhere? I mean, how do you manage that side of membership?
Well, no, the funny thing is when I go to a place and I'm going as Clarence or CA, that's my personal name that nobody knows, CA, or if I go as the CEO. If I go as Clarence, the CA, I don't call anyone. I go in, I have a cap on, a T-shirt, and I walk around. But when I do go as CEO, man, I am so full and overwhelmed of the pride that every municipal official they have for their city. It's amazing that I've never met a mayor or a city commissioner that don't think their city is the best city used to be in America.
Yeah.
Now they say we're the best city in the world.
Yeah.
They want to show off the things that they're doing to help their city residents. Last year, celebrating our 100th anniversary, we had a goal of visiting over 100 cities, and we did that in an RV bus. And every time we would pull up and get off of that bus, our members would be like cheering that the National League of Cities is here. And it gave me an opportunity and a better sense of how to do my job, because I saw people in their own community. I saw why they cared for their community. I saw that there are things that we should be advocating for that we were not. and I needed to know that. I needed to get outside of the bubble of the DMV because the news was totally different in other parts of the nation. Some were about farmers, some were about pigs, others was about water resources, other about housing or hurricanes in the state of Florida. It was just different. And going to those communities made me and my team members understand why we did what we did every day. And I don't oftentimes see the chasm between our members when it comes to their size, because honestly, some of the smallest city mayors walk around the conference like they run the whole country. And the bigger city mayors, they're like, "Oh, hi, how you doing?" But it's just great to see and be around. So I'm really proud that we've been able to maintain who the National League of Cities, and we represent all communities.
Well, I really admire that. I read about that roadshow, I guess I'll call it, that you took going to over 130 cities across America to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the National League of Cities. And so I appreciate you sharing why it was important for you to show up and have those experiences. And I have to wonder, nowadays, I think partly because of technology, it seems like everyone is so focused on national issues, presidential elections, what's happening in Congress. And I think sometimes people forget to pay attention to the local issues that really are so important for our day-to-day lives. And I wonder, do you find that you, as the leader of the organization and your members, are you having to remind Americans that, yeah, it's good to pay attention to what's happening in Washington, but there's a lot of important stuff happening locally, and you got to be involved to influence it. It seems like that's maybe a change that I've seen, in my life, paying attention to politics.
Yeah, I think as a municipal official, a former municipal official, you have to remember all politics is local. And if you're mayor of South Bay, Florida, you have to first focus on your community. And I think that most residents, no matter what happens in Washington, D.C., they tend to be concerned generally about their community first. And it's like looking at a map of your town. The first place you look is your own street, your own home. And that's the way our residents are, because all surveys show that the most trusted level of government still is the local government, the city and town and village level trust, because they see you every day. You can't fly off to the other side of town like our congressional members. They fly up to Washington, D.C. They're not home every day like we are, and I was, or running into you at the grocery store, and you're supposed to go in there and pick up one item, and it takes you 45 minutes because some people have issues that they want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
So those kinds of experiences and thoughts make us recognize that we need to be their voice here in Washington, D.C. We need to get that information down to our members. And we also need to lift up the stories, the positive stories that cities have in their communities, so that we can share that broadly and make sure cities are not forgotten, because we got to make sure that those congressional members and the White House know that we are tackling housing. And here's how we're doing it. We're helping to build bridges and roads and sidewalks and communities. And here's how we're doing it with your support and partnership. So we're never going to let them forget that, all politics is local. Tip O'Neill said that. And we made sure that the members of Congress recognized that we want to have not a one-size-fit-all America. We want communities to be so diverse and so different that residents can spend their entire life traveling throughout our country, seeing the great cities, towns, and villages, and understand why they're important.
Absolutely. I want to ask you a tactical question about influence. You mentioned earlier, you know, you could have a town meeting where 100 people show up, and you've advertised your rate increase, and yet people, it's like they've never heard about it before. And I think this is a common challenge that leaders face at all levels, right? You communicated something, whether that's employees inside a company or community members, and, for some reason, it just doesn't break through. And you shared really great expertise around why inclusive engagement is so important early in the process, getting folks on board. When you think about your diverse and vast array of members across the country, I'm really interested in how you approach tactically getting the message out, the right message to the right people. And one of the things you've done is you launched your own podcast, Cities Speak with Clarence Anthony, where you interview local leaders and other experts about the key issues that are facing cities today. And, you have a lot going on. I mean, you were traveling, you just did this 130 city bus tour not that long ago. Why did you prioritize a podcast as one of the tactics that you use to get your message out there? Because I think there are other leaders that they may be considering it, and hearing directly from you about why you chose to do that as one other way to create a channel to get your message out to the right people will be really valuable for them to hear. And it's great. You have just some incredible guests on. In fact, I'm here in Washington, D.C., and you had Mayor Bowser on recently, but would love to just know the thought process that went into it.
Well, it is, first of all, it is a lot of work for my team to get prepared and to get those guests. But it's important. It's important because I talked about it a little bit earlier. We need to, first of all, show that local leaders are real people. And a lot of the conversation that we have with our guests is about their why. Who are they? What motivated them? Because I sometimes have conversations with folks and friends, and they have this vision around who elected leaders are, and they start to say all these negative things, and I'll say, well, do you really know them? That they really teach elementary school, that they are nurses in their community. They really don't know them, and I found that was very important. And it was a lesson to me because when I was in Florida at the Florida League of Cities and I was president, I was going into a hotel and a valet took my luggage and he said, "Hey, Mayor Anthony, man, it's good seeing you. I really was motivated by your speech." And I said, "Oh, I didn't speak here before." He said, "Oh, I'm the mayor of Lake City, Florida. This is my day job. I'm also mayor." And it just dawned on me that we assume, first of all, that every elected official, that's their only job because they put 50 hours a day in. But also that it put a face for me on this person having to balance their jobs and what they do. And the podcast gives me a chance to dig into that a little bit and to really connect my members and elected officials and residents, private sector, whoever else that listens to the podcast around who they are. The second is, what is their passion? And when I talk about their passion, it just lifts them up in a way that somebody really does care about their issue. Whether it was civility, whether it is, you talk about Mayor Bowser, to hear her talk about her community, I remember saying, gosh, you just talked about a love letter to your residents. Because the way in which she talked, it was just so amazing that she can talk about neighborhoods and sustainability, jobs, the greenery. It was just, you can almost see her city by her way she spoke about her community. And then the final thing is, we have to lift up the positive things that cities are doing. It's a must, because if we left it to other media sources and sectors, it would not be the stories that I'm sharing and providing the opportunity for our members to do so. Because what we find is, you turn on the news, it's the latest crime or housing problems. We want to be able to lift up those positive stories and projects so that other city leaders throughout America will hear how that leader approached this problem and say, wow, I can do that too. I'm going to call the city hall of that leader and ask them, can I get more information? And so I think that through that podcast, what we have found is that there's been connectivity around our members through the podcast. And I feel really good about that. We're going to keep pushing and building on the podcast so that we can continue to increase our listeners, because my cousin got more listeners than I do, and I gotta do better, Anthony, than him.
There's a lot of them out there. Makes it hard. People are so busy. But I think, you have great content like you do, and you just keep doing it. And I love what you said, that we have to lift the positive stories. We can't just depend on the media, because of course we know that, the news media thrive on. I'm a former TV journalist back in college, and a great crime story is what people turn to, unfortunately, and that means there's so much of that. And I think that just the imperative that there are these wonderful stories in your communities that you represent and your membership, and it's kind of on you to lift them up. And I think that's really important. And I want to ask you, as we I wish we could go for another hour, but your team I'll be in big trouble if I try to do that. But you mentioned civility, and you mentioned, positive stories. And I know this is something that you really care a lot about. You wrote a report several years ago around the challenges of civility and democratic institutions at the local level. But there are bright spots. And I wondered if maybe you could share just any bright spots that give you hope at this time. We're all very concerned about civility.
Yeah, I think about that often, because I just had a focus group meeting with about 8 members of my board of directors, and they were talking about a couple of things, but the incivility was one that kept coming up. The uncertainty of times kept coming up, and they talked about incivility in a way that made them think about how they govern and how they lead and how their meetings cadence would occur. That many of them wanted to open up their using technology, and the technology that they used during the pandemic, to bring more transparency and access. But in a lot of ways, those tools were being misused by those that didn't really care about that. They just wanted to say negative things. And it has gotten even worse at some communities. But back in 2021, I started seeing this trend. And I came back to the team. I said, we need to do a survey and see if this really is actually happening. And we found that almost 80% of those surveyed said they had been bullied. Their kids had been bullied. They've had some form of harassment. And the ultimate outcome really is not positive. Many people were saying, I'm out of here. I did not sign up for this. They were deciding that they were not going to seek reelection. And in terms of representation, number of the women that were in the survey said that they were not going to seek reelection. So we lost some great leaders. We also were concerned that of the cost that it's going to have on communities, because now there's plexiglass, there's police officers, and the final thing is that, we're here at NLC focusing on trying to get the future public administrators to see this as a positive career. So we have interns we bring in and we expose them, but we're also wanting to have partnerships with the universities to make sure that people see that this is still a great career. And so as we think about now, I think that we're going to continue to do this work. We're going to continue to help our leaders by our conferences or through our conferences, talking about those challenges, but giving tactical solutions. We're going to keep lifting them up in a way at our conference, talking about mindfulness, mental health. All of those things are necessary now. And I think that we are not going to just say that we have successfully turned this into a positive time in terms of local leadership. It really is a very challenging time. But we're going to provide the tools to our members so that they can, again, govern, and they can lead their communities, and they can surround themselves with positive stories and positive experiences so that they can stay focused on their job and their role, and that is to lead their communities. But I want to close with saying it is challenging, but our leaders are really resilient, and I'm really proud of them, and we're going to work through this.
Well, I love hearing the things that you are focused on, particularly reaching young people, so that the great leaders like you were when you were 23 and decided to get involved with politics after that city meeting and to run for mayor, and you became mayor at age 24 and served your community for decades, as well as serving the state and National League of Cities. As I think about kind of what we talked about in today's conversation on Chief Influencer with you, Clarence Anthony, you talked about inclusive leadership at the beginning. And I think you really closed with that as well, because you talked about the importance of listening and meeting the needs of your various communities where they are, so that you could adapt and provide solutions and help elevate those positive stories that they're telling, so that they can learn from one another through your meetings, but also through the City Speak podcast that you host, where you're highlighting those positive stories. And I think that's such an important quality of leadership. I really love the story you told about your mom coming to a meeting and how that reinforced those lessons that, can't all be with one person. It has to be, community has to step up to address a challenge. And you paraphrased Tip O'Neill and all politics is local, and I'll paraphrase that back. I think all influence is local might be the theme that I heard from today's conversation with you about the role that the National League of Cities plays. So maybe that's our new paraphrase of that old adage, and all influence is local, I think is a really important thing for us to think about in terms of how we connect with people to influence them at the local level, so that we can achieve more as a broader community. And it starts with trust, which is something that I think you established, and certainly your tour across the country to visit 130 cities to celebrate the 100th anniversary. And you shared why not only do you do things online like your podcast, but that you show up in person and building trust at that individual level is so important. So many great lessons from our conversation today. I really, really appreciate you making time to join us on Chief Influencer and share your story. And I encourage folks to find you, Clarence Anthony, CEO of the National League of Cities, and follow your organization so that they can learn more about the leadership lessons that you shared. And of course, subscribe to your podcast, City Speak.
Well, let me thank you, because this is a big deal for me to be on your podcast and being considered as a chief influencer. And I'm so proud and honored. So thank you for having me.
It was my pleasure. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to City Speak with Clarence Anthony. If you like this show, let us know. Share this episode with your friends and make sure to subscribe. We're curious to hear what you think, what you want more of, and how we can improve. If you have feedback or an idea for a guest you'd like Clarence to sit down with, send us your thoughts at cityspeakpodcast@nlc.org. Join us next month for a new episode. Like and subscribe here or wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.